everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we're going to finish up making our chicken pot pies. We made our dough earlier today, and then we'll make an apple crisp pie and for dinner tonight. So we're going to start by sauteing up the vegetables that we're going to have in the inside of our chicken pot pie. So I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil in this big, it's kind of like a saucepan. It's a mix between a frying pan and a saucepan, but it's quite large, but it's perfect for this. And I'm going to turn on my heat to about a medium high. I'm going to start up with slicing one yellow onion. Take off the edges and this outer shell. Perfect. And I'm just going to do a small dice on this. Clear off some of that. So just down, and this about the size because I don't want my onion chunks to be quite big in here, because it's going to be kind of like all the vegetables and the chicken mixed together in a little gravy. So I don't want anything to be too overpowering. Perfect. So I've got my onion diced up, and I'm just going to throw that in my oil over here that I have heating up over medium high. And then I'm going to add in some garlic while it's heating up, about maybe closer to 2 teaspoons. So I'm just gonna put my knife in and get a good serving of that in there. You could use fresh garlic. That's probably about 1 to 2 cloves of fresh garlic if you wanted to use that. And now I'm gonna chop up some celery. So I have some celery stalks here, and I'm just gonna do, like the onions, just kind of a nice thin slice down, because I don't want them to be too big.
What are you making tonight?
Chicken pot pie. So earlier today, we prepped our dough, our butter crust. I have it right over here. I just took it out of the fridge. So that's our butter crust for our chicken pot pie, and then we're going to use one also for our apple crisp pie. That will be our dessert. And now we're just prepping up the filling for our chicken pot pie. And what I do is I kind of saute all my vegetables and chicken together, and then I'm going to make a roux. And I'll add that roux to the sauteed vegetables, and that's what I'm going to put inside our pie crust. But the trick is, you've got to saute everything up. That really brings out the flavors and makes the vegetables really tender. So you're not really relying so much on the oven to cook the inside. The oven is really for just cooking up the buttered crust. So I'm just putting this all in my saute pan, and they'll all saute together. There's a couple in here I want to get a little bit smaller. These 3. They must have been the ends of the stalk. There we go. And then you get a spoon, and I'm going to stir this up, make sure everything kind of gets coated with the olive oil. And I'm also going to be adding in carrots, mushrooms for my chicken pot pie. I kind of do just like a kind of like soup vegetables in it is what I think of, but it will be more like in a gravy type thing, but it gives you that homey feeling to it. If I do, sometimes I do like a beef pie, and I do a slightly different vegetables for that. But today, chicken pot pie. I've been kind of craving it. It's been cold here, and I was like, oh, do I do chicken noodle soup or chicken pot pie? And I didn't have any raw turkey thighs. That's what I like to use for my chicken noodle soup. That and like breast have. But I do have rotisserie chicken, which is great for making the pot pie, because then I have to do less work. So for my carrots, I'm just gonna do a thin chop on these. Not too big. I want them to be able to get tendered up in the saute, and then they'll finish off baking in the oven for their complete softness. But I don't want them to be too big, because I want them to be soft when our pie is done. And this one, we're going to bake it in, I have my ovens preheating to 425. And when they're done, they just need about 30 or so minutes to bake. And really what you're looking for is for the crust to be golden brown and firm to touch. And that's when you know you're done, because with this we're cooking the insides first, so it's not we're not like relying on it to cook all the way through. And when I'm sauteing up vegetables, I typically will start with my carrots or my onions and my celery first, and I add in my carrots, and later I'll add in my mushrooms, simply because these onions and celery will release their sugars and caramelize a little bit as you saute them, and they need a little bit longer. And then with the carrots, the same thing. They're a firmer vegetable, so they need a little bit longer. And then mushrooms don't need very much time at all. And then I'll add in my shredded chicken at the very end. You could also use like a saute, like if you were to chop up some chicken breasts and saute up, you could use it in this as well. But I find this like shredded rotisserie chicken from Costco works great, because it gives you more of that authentic chicken chunk feel in it, versus when you cut up just a chicken breast, it just gets firm and chewy and is not quite as good. Okay, almost done. I got a few more carrots to chop up here. And then I'll add them to our sauteing vegetables. And this is a meal, it's kind of nice, you make it in steps. I made the dough earlier today because it needs to sit and chill in the fridge for a couple of hours. And now I'm making the base, and then you'll have a bake time. So it's kind of like, it's not a work the whole time meal. It's like you have steps and then rest, which is nice on certain meals if you want to have more of like a lazy day cooking. I'm going to put my carrots in here. There we go. And now I'm going to give this a good stir. Make sure I'm trying to get all of my carrots to be coated in that olive oil as well. Perfect. And I'm just going to turn up my heat a little bit higher since I've added a lot of colder vegetables, so it's going to bring my pan's temperature down. And then I'm going to sprinkle, for now, while they're roasting, a little bit of garlic salt and some black pepper. And I'm just going to sprinkle it on the top. I'm not going to stir it in yet. I'm just going to sprinkle it. And then a little bit of ground black pepper. So I put probably about a teaspoon and a half of garlic salt and about a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of black pepper in there. And while those are sauteing, I'm just going to prep our mushrooms. I have a mixture of white mushrooms and baby bella. They both work well with it. I just had these left over from some other recipes I used. And I'm just going to make sure I'm kind of dicing them up because I don't want to have any chunks that are too big to manage. Because if you think about it, when you eat chicken pot pie, you want bite-sized pieces. So I want to make sure everything I chop up is a bite-sized piece. So I'm just kind of doing a rough chop on these guys just to get them down. And again, I do not wash my mushrooms, because when you wash mushrooms, they absorb the water that you do it, and then they get soggy, so they don't saute up as nicely. And with them being a fungus already, you don't necessarily need to wash them. You just need to clean them of debris. But since these ones are already store-bought, they typically have already been cleaned well, and then they've been where they blow them with air to clean them off. Here we go. And we'll get my next one out. And these are my button mushrooms. I typically would use just baby bellas. I think they have a nicer flavor. But these were on sale this week, so we just grabbed a pack.
What are you making?
We're making chicken pot pie. So earlier today we made our dough, our butter crust. Just simple. It's made from butter, flour, salt, and water. And it chilled for a couple hours, and now we are making the filling for our chicken pot pie. So I've got onions in here sauteing up with celery and carrots. I added a little bit of garlic salt, some minced garlic, and pepper. And now we're chopping up some mushrooms that we will add to this base. And then I will chop up my rotisserie chicken and throw that in there and let that saute and let all the flavors come out. And then I will transfer everything to a bowl and then make a roux, which is essentially a gravy base for my chicken pot pie so that it has a nice gravy on everything. And then we will also make, with our butter crust, a simple apple crisp pie. I do my apple pies a little bit different than people, because I like to pre-cook my apples. So I will saute them up in a saucepan for a little bit with some fresh lemon juice and some sugar and cinnamon. And once they've softened up a little bit, I add them to my pie. And the reason I do that is I don't like dry apple pie. I always like the filling to be soft and juicy. And so I find that doing a little pre-cook makes for a really tender apple pie without the filling or the crust getting overcooked.
A question and a comment. First, they're saying that's a lot of mushrooms. And secondly, what seasoning are you using?
So in here, a lot of mushrooms. This is going to make 2 big chicken pot pies. And I love mushrooms, so I always use it. It's almost a pound of mushrooms. And then in here, the celery and the onion are really gonna come out in the flavor. And then I just use a little bit of garlic salt, minced garlic, and black pepper. And it's really gonna be more of a chicken and savory flavor. I'm not adding any special seasonings to it because I'm really just kind of bringing out that the traditional chicken pot pie. I will use some chicken bouillon in my roux when I make that, as well as some more pepper and some garlic salt. But it's just a very simple seasoning. I really want the celery and the onions and the carrots to really speak out. They're gonna be adding that really robust flavor to it. And if you don't like mushrooms, you could always omit this. I just love mushrooms, and 2 of my kids really like them, and my parents like them. But my husband and my girls, they do not like them. But as my husband has learned through the time, I do not cook for just one person. I cook for a small army, so they can eat around it.
What's the 2 type of mushrooms?
I just have a white button mushroom and a baby bella. Normally I would use all portobello ones, but button were on sale, and these were just left over from some of the other meals I cooked. There we go. Whew. Got one jumping overboard here. Okay, let those up, and I'm gonna start chopping up chicken. So this is already pre-cooked, hand-pulled rotisserie chicken, fancy. It's just Costco's rotisserie chicken. It's great to use for trying to make meals faster, so I don't have to pre-cook my chicken.
Someone said they made the sourdough biscuits and they turned out great.
Oh, good. I'm glad. It's a very simple recipe, and it wasn't too challenging, but they were really good. So with my, this is already hand pulled, but I like to give a quick chop through everything because sometimes the pieces in it are quite large. Like they literally just pull the breast off of the rotisserie chicken.
Oh, she's asking if we ever make sourdough bread.
Oh, yes, we did. It is, we already finished it. We didn't have any much left over. It was my first bread from the dough, and I think I needed it to sit another 2 days. I think my kitchen has been a little bit colder than what it normally was because we had a really cold spell here, and our heat, one of my kids must have turned off the heat in the middle of the night. We woke up and it was freezing. So I think I'm gonna remake it, and I'm hoping it won't be as dense, but I think it just didn't ferment quite as well, even though it was on day 8 or 9. It was almost there, but you know how if you make it, sometimes it's a little dense. That's because your fermentation process hasn't completed. So it was a little under, but I have already been feeding and getting ready. I think I'm gonna make some muffins tomorrow and start off a new batch of sourdough.
People asking if that's chicken you're cutting up.
This is like Costco's rotisserie chicken. You can buy it in bulk packs there. And I just get this, and it just makes meal cooking really fast during the week for us. So I'm gonna just scoop this up and put this in here, and because I want the chicken to get flavored with all the vegetables. And this is about, I think it's 2.5 pounds of rotisserie chicken. So again, I'm making 2 really big chicken pot pies. And that's because we feed a small army here. Wash my hands real quick. I have 5 children, and then my husband and then I cook also for my parents. So we are feeding 9 people pretty much every day, multiple times a day. So we go through a lot of food here. And this one is a favorite, especially with my parents and my oldest son. He absolutely loves chicken pot pie. So I'm just stirring it up, getting it all mixed together. So you see when we add in the chicken, you feel like you had a lot of vegetables before, but now it's really more overpowering with chicken, which is what my kids love. They love the chicken part of it. But I mean, you can always like boil your own chicken or roast it and then like shred it yourself. I just buy the pre-shredded because it saves me time. And we have a lot of sports during the week. So I'm gonna add about a teaspoon more of garlic, salt, and a bit more of the pepper now that I added the chicken in.
A question, do your parents live in the same house?
No, they do not. They live just like 3 miles down the road from us. But we watch their dog during the day. I watch theirs, so we see them morning and night. They're really busy. They work crazy, hectic jobs, and I just find I love cooking, and it's a way that I can help them out, just making it easier for them, and it also allows us to really have a good relationship. They get to see my kids all the time, and really get to be involved because they're here eating all the time. But they do not live in our house, so that's also a blessing. Okay, I got our chicken kind of heated up all the way through. I am just going to steal a small taste to make sure it's seasoned. I'm also going to be making a roux in just a second, and that will have the rest of the flavor, but I want to make sure it has some good seasoning now.
You want to explain what a roux is?
A roux it's a fancy word, but it's really not. It's just melting butter and flour, and you put it together. So you have the melted butter in a saucepan, you add the flour and it will clump up, and then you add your liquid, and the fat and the flour with the liquid make a gravy together. So it's just I guess the French word for a gravy base or a gumbo base. If you cook it longer, the flour and the butter longer before adding like liquids, it will get brown, and that's how you make a brown gumbo base. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my chicken in here. It's heavy. It's a lot of food. And then I'm going to use this same sauce dish to make my roux because I like to clean up less dishes. And this is a great pan for doing it because it's both a saute pan and
Yeah, the usual question, how'd you learn how to cook?
Honestly, just years of practice. I actually started cooking for my family when I was 13. We had a cook growing up, and then when we got older, we decided to each kid to take turns cooking and help like lower the burden for my parents. And I took over, and it was supposed to be 1 day a week, and then I was doing it like 5 days a week, and I just practiced from then.
As the youngest of 7.
Oh yes, so the youngest of 7. So there was always a lot of mouths to feed, but we were always very busy. My parents were at our academics, and so they worked long hours, and so we learned to be very self-sufficient and to cook for ourselves, and that's where I kind of really learned the love of cooking. So I took about a half a stick of butter in here, and I am melting it. I'm trying to get all of the good little seasonings that are stuck on the bottom of my pan. I'm just really covering that. You guys could use a spatula or something like that. I am so not heat sensitive, so I am always putting my fingers near hot things, but I never get burned. I know my limits. I'm gonna use a whisk for this. But I have my heat turned down to low because I don't want to burn it. And I'm waiting for all of my butter to get melted. And while that's melting, I'm going to turn on my water over here to start getting hot because I want to use hot water with this. And I'm going to use chicken bouillon base. So you can use chicken broth, but I think bouillon, I can add more of it to get more flavor. This is always what my secret tip for like stews and soup is I use this instead of chicken broth because I can add more and I can get more of that chicken flavor in my meals, which adds a richness to either the gravy or the broth without adding more liquid. And then we're gonna get some flour. As we check, I'm gonna wait until my butter is all kind of sizzling here before I add my flour. Let's see, okay, good, we've got warm enough water over here. And I'm gonna start with 4 cups of water, just because I wanna make a lot of roux, or a lot of like a gravy base. So, but hopefully you guys learned a word or a technique today. So you melt your butter like this. So it's all melted, it's starting to get a little frothy and foam, which is perfect. You don't want it on too high because you don't want to burn it. And then I'm gonna start off, a little bit of flour goes a long way. So I used half a stick of butter because I'm making a lot of it. And I'm gonna start off with about, maybe 1/4 cup of flour. And I'm just simply gonna mix it and it's gonna turn into a paste. And I wanted to add a little bit more because I want it to be a nice thick paste before I add my liquid. And simply this technique just prevents you from having like a lumpy gravy. Instead of just pouring flour straight into broth or whatnot, which will just congeal, this prevents you from that aspect of it.
Thanks for the note, Pam. We'll have to try that in the future. We'll check it out.
Okay, so I've got my little chunks here. I'm gonna take a big scoop of chicken bouillon and I'm gonna add it to my broth. And then I'm gonna add this. And I'm just gonna mix with my whisk. You're gonna wanna whisk for this, a little at a time. And essentially you're gonna break this up and as it cooks under the heat, it will start to thicken into a nice gravy. And you just keep adding water. Just want to do a little bit at a time, not a whole bunch. Otherwise, you'll like over dilute it and it will take forever to get back to the gravy form. And your whole point is you want to whisk out any of the flour globs as it goes. And then I'm using my whisk in here to get some of that, the bouillon broken up. And that chicken bouillon is going to give it a nice, a chickeny flavor to this gravy that I'll be pouring over all of the meat and my vegetable, and that's the base of my chicken pot pie. There. I'm turning up my heat a little bit higher now that I've got some good liquid in here. And you can see the hotter it gets, the thicker the roux or the gravy is gonna be. So as you can see in the middle of it is where it's hot, it's getting really thick right there. And that's just the flour and the butter and the water absorbing together. So it's just really a fancy technique for making gravy. This is how I make all of my gravies really. So if I'm making if I have a beef roast, and I will get the beef drippings from it and then some beef bouillon and water, and I'll start with a roux and I'll make the gravy from that. It's just, I don't know, it was the way I was taught. My mom taught me how to do that because meals growing up, we had chicken a la king and yellow chicken, and both of those dishes you make a roux with. And so I learned how to make those, and then I've been able to use that technique in a lot of other meals. And that's the thing with learning how to cook. It's starting out with basic techniques and then just improving on them and mastering them, and then just getting more fancy with flavor profiles. But I find, sometimes always going back to the basics is the best. You don't have to have, a crazy work of art like baked Alaskan or macaroons. You can, wow with a basic chocolate chip recipe or a good biscuit or a great chicken pot pie. There we go. And I'm just whisking vigorously because I just don't want any of it to burn or anything. And with it being a flour mixture, it could. So And I'm just gonna keep adding and keep reducing it down because I wanna get all of this broth in there. And then I will add my chicken base, or my chicken and sauteed vegetables to this. And then it'll be time to roll out our dough. It's pretty easy to make chicken pot pie. It seems more daunting, but it really isn't too difficult. There we go. I think it's just about the last. And then I do know some people like to add cream to theirs, so there's more of a creamy chicken pot pie. Sometimes I do that, and sometimes I don't. It just kind of depends what we're feeling on. But we had, you know, broccoli and cheddar soup for lunch today, so I'm kind of like, oh, we've had enough kind of cream in there. We'll do just the broth base. But you can definitely do it both ways. Look at that. So we're getting nice thickening up, which is what we want. Because you don't want it to be too thin, but you don't want it to be too thick. You want it to be just enough to really be able to coat all of your chicken and your vegetables. So I'm gonna taste it, see if I need to add any more seasonings to it. I'm gonna add a little bit of pepper, and then I think we're pretty much good. I find it's such a simple one that basic ingredients like pepper just really enhance it without changing the flavor profile too much. Okay, so we've got this to about right where I want it, so I'm gonna turn off our heat. And it's gonna bubble a little bit more, but that's perfect because I wanna add in this chicken and the sauteed celery and carrots and onions. And we'll stir it up and really coat all of this with that so that it has a nice flavor all around it, and it will keep the inside of our chicken pot pie really moist. And you see it makes quite a lot for our base, but this is what we're putting right inside our butter pie crust. There we go. So you see how it's just enough to really coat everything, but it's not swimming in the gravy, but it's enough to really get everything flavored and nice and moist. Perfect. So I have it turned off, and now we can roll out our pie crusts. So I'm just gonna clean my space over here because I need a little rolling area. Okay, we don't need this anymore, so I can put it over here. And we're done. So you want a good flat area to roll out. And my trick for rolling out my pie crust is I put it between 2 sheets of parchment paper. It just makes it easier for rolling. It doesn't stick to any of the surfaces, and I don't have to flour everything. Let me wipe it down, it's a little bit wet. So my butter crust that we made earlier, I made a double batch of it since we were making 2 big pies, and that was about 4 1/2 cups of flour, and about 2 teaspoons of salt, 4 sticks of butter, cold butter, and about a cup of cold water. And we cut the butter into the flour until we were ready to add the water, and then we mixed it with a fork and lightly squeezed everything together. So I've got my 2 sheets of parchment paper, and what I do is I just start out with a lump of my pie dough, and then I'm gonna start rolling it out right here. And this is a marble rolling pin. I really enjoy the marble rolling pin over a wooden one because it's got some good heft to it. So I'm just gonna start by really pushing out these corners. And you can see underneath here, it's moving out. The reason why I use the parchment paper is because the dough won't stick to the rolling pin and it won't stick to the countertop. So I don't need to constantly flour my surface. So we'll just leave the dough just nice thing. And because we chilled the dough so that it's cold when it bakes to give you a really flaky layer, it is a little bit more tough to roll out, but it's worth it. You want to make sure you chill it because that's going to give you those flaky layers in your pie crust. And I don't try to roll out a perfect circle. I just try to roll out big enough to fit over mine. And then I will just pick off the edges. And the same with the top. But it is a good workout, I will say. But it beats, I will say, a butter pie crust is so much better than anything that you can buy at the store. It's just, it's so buttery and flaky. And it works, it's nice because I make this and it has enough to make like a small little pie crust for a dessert afterwards. I've also made like little lemon tarts with it. Okay, we can see my progress here. We're about, needs a little bit bigger. And I'll just flip it over and lift up and work on this side. And I will say, the first one's always the hardest because it's the coldest. By the time I get to my last pie crust, it rolls out a lot faster. But we'll just roll this one, and then I'll put it in my pie thing. And I don't butter my pie tins at all. There's enough butter in the crust that it won't stick to it, and it will just crisp up nice. Okay, let me see. I think this might be good, a little bit more. And then we should be able to put our first pie crust in. It is a lot of arm work, but well worth it. Okay. So we've got our first pie crust here. Ta-da! So I don't worry about making a perfect circle or anything like that. I'm just gonna flip it over and put it in my pie container and then just kind of work it to where it all falls down. And then here's what I do so you don't have to worry about making it perfect, you just do the patch. So you just patch right here, and that's how, when you finish, we put the top crust on, and then we'll use our fork technique to make the jute edges, you won't even know how like uneven your first crust is. That's why I always say, I said, just whip them out, don't worry about it towards the end, it will become beautiful. So we have our inner base, and I always leave my extras dangling here because when I can fold it and then I'll smush all the way around. So I'm gonna pop out my second one. Let's see. I like to keep them covered up with like a piece of towel or plastic just to keep them from drying out. I'm gonna start, give it a good smush my ball down so I can have a good kind of circle base to start with. And then we're gonna roll it out. And you know what I do? I pick like one in the middle and then I roll it to the edge. And just like this one's already rolling out faster because it's a little bit softer from it. I will say, don't ever put your dough in the freezer. Don't think, oh, I'll just put it in the freezer real quick to chill it. You'll have rock hard dough that will be impossible to roll out. I did that once, thinking, oh, I can just chill it real quick. It'll be the same as if it's in the fridge for, 2 hours. My dough was rock hard and I had to sit and wait for it to soften up. And then it just turned into kind of like a mess. There. Gonna get this rolling out nicely. And then what I'll do is, once I get this crust rolled out, I'm gonna fill it, and then I'll smooth the top layer around, cut my hole for it to breathe out of the top, and I'll pop it in the oven, because we'll eat about one pie for us dinner tonight, and then I save a chicken pot pie for leftovers to have, and then for my parents also to take home so that they can enjoy. But I will say, this is, if you've ever had like a Marie Callender's chicken pot pie, this is like so much better. You get more chicken bite, you get a completely crusted up crust. It's nice and flaky. Okay, let me see, I think we're almost there on this one. And I don't aim for so much of a thickness. I would just want it to be uniform and just enough to fit over the pie crust. So I don't worry about, oh, does it have to be 1/4 of an inch thick or something like that. I said it's all gonna cook up nice as long as it's about even everywhere. I said with this, you really don't have to be as precise as, you know, if you're like, oh, it has to be this and you're getting out your roller. You don't need to do that in cooking, you know. So much of it is, can just, you know, feel through it. I think that should be the right size. Okay, so I'm gonna get a ladle and fill this one. And I like to fill them and bake them so that my crust stays cold. Because if I try to roll them all out and then fill them and then bake them, the dough will get softened. And the key is you want to have cold pie crust dough, because that's where you're going to get your flaky crust from. So I'm just scooping it up, and I'm just trying to eyeball, make sure I use half of it, but it makes a good meaty filling in here. And we'll serve it with a salad and some fresh fruit. Let's see, about one more. There we go. So I've got it filled up. And here is my pie crust top. I'm just gonna lay it over like this. And then I'm just gonna peel back this. It just makes the transfer so much easier if you do it on parchment paper. You can do it on wax. And then what we do is we're just gonna go around, and first you're just gonna pinch together your edges, and then we'll go through with a fork and we'll make it pretty. But that's more for the aesthetics and not the taste. So I'm pinching all of this, and this is just to make a good seal all the way through. And then we'll cut a hole in the middle so that your pie won't explode. You gotta make sure you cut a hole in the middle, especially when you have any liquid base in it. If you don't, the steam will rise up and your pie will pop, and eventually it will crack open. So I've got it pinched all the way around. And then I'm gonna get just a kitchen fork. And you just simply go around the edges like this. And this will just give a nice crispy crust right there, and just makes it look a little bit nicer. All the way around, and then I'll poke a hole in the center, and I'll make a little bit of some slits. And if you're really fancy and you have extra pie crust, you can cut out little shapes and decorate it. I did that once, and that just took a lot of time. That was cute, but I turn out food to eat, not for art. So I'm just gonna, right in the middle, you're giving it a belly button. So just a little hole, and then you're gonna make some little slits. And that's just so that it can breathe, like this. And we're gonna go pop it in the oven. I like to, when I'm baking my pot pies, I like to put them on a baking tray, just so that if any bubbles over, it bubbles over on my baking tray and not in my oven. It will save you the mess because there's always a little bubble over. So I'm gonna start, and we're gonna put this in our oven. My oven's been preheating to 425 because we wanna get it to cook fast with a nice golden crisp, because again, this is a butter crust. So we want a fast, high heat cook versus a slow and steady. So I have that in there. And that is gonna start baking, and we'll roll out our next one, and then we'll work on our apple pie. But they do get faster with each one because the dough gets a little bit softer with each rollout. So I'm gonna start by giving it a good press. And this is just to help it have that round. When you press it out, you already are starting with your circle. And then we're gonna roll it out. Nice. And then for our apple pie, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna peel up some apples, and I'm gonna put them in a saucepan with a little bit of butter, sugar, lemon juice, cinnamon, and salt. And I just saute them up for a little bit until they start to get soft. Then I'll put a splash of cornstarch in, And that will give a thicken up the apple pie so it has that kind of, I want to say that like smooth filling feeling to it. And then we'll put it in, and then I'm going to make a crumb topping, which is just melting some butter, and I'll add some brown sugar to it and flour. And you just kind of mix that together until it's got a coarse meal, and you sprinkle that over the top. Okay. And these only need about 30 minutes in the oven to bake, which is nice. They don't take long, because again, you're just waiting for the pie crust to stick up. I'm gonna flip it, work on the other side. I'm just waiting for the pie crust to really crisp up instead of cooking the inside. And that's the nice thing about pre-cooking and sauteing up our vegetables. Not only does it give it a nice flavor, but it allows it to cook a lot faster. I think we're almost about ready for this guy. And of course, you can also make smaller. I used to do individual chicken pot pies, but that was a lot more work. So I found that for our large family, doing a big chicken pot pie, you still get the same great taste and feeling, but half the work. Because most of the work on your chicken pot pie is rolling out your pie crust. I think we're about there. Just peeling it off. And then I'll just patch to where we need it to be. This one I think was a little bit smaller of the dough one, so I'm gonna have to do a little more patching here. And like I said, with cooking, it's all about learning through time and getting better with each one. I might need to add a little extra on that one before I flip it out. Must have been a smaller blob of dough. And now we're gonna roll out the next one. I'm gonna push it down. And do this. You could also, if you wanted to, you could do an egg wash on the top of your pie. That's gonna give you a shiny finish. But I find with the butter crust, it's so good on its own that you don't need the egg wash on it. It's crispy, flaky. It's really just for aesthetics if you want it. But I find that it kind of takes away from the butter flavor of it. So we're gonna really roll this one out. I'm gonna fix a couple. See, when I rolled it, it kind of got a little off edge here. A quick way to fix it so that you can have a nice circle is just to patch like that. And then when you roll it out, they'll smooth together. And that way you can work on having a perfect circle versus something that turns out looking like a triangle or a box. And that's what, for me, the goal is my food, it doesn't have to be beautiful. It just needs to taste delicious. I feel like that's the difference between chefs and cooks. Cooks make sure your food tastes good. Chefs make sure it looks like art. But again, this is just a simple crust. I think we used 4.5 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of salt, 4 sticks of butter, and about a cup of cold water, which we then we cut the butter into the flour and salt mixture, and then slowly added in the water. We made sure not to over mix because we want to have nice flaky layers. And then you just let it chill for a couple hours. Okay, and I think this is about ready. Yeah. Okay. I think we have a good covering here. So we're gonna fill this one up, and then I'm gonna use that crust to fill in some of the gaps on this one because this was a smaller ball, but the end product will be just the same. So I'm gonna fill this guy up. And this is my chicken pot pie mixture. So we used, we sauteed up onions, carrots, celery, minced garlic, and some olive oil. And then we added in about a pound of mushrooms and some rotisserie chicken. And we sauteed those together with some garlic, salt, and pepper. And then we made a roux using flour, butter, and chicken bouillon. And that's what's the nice sauces on here. And gives it all the good flavoring. Perfect. So I'm just gonna fill it up. Put this guy over here. And now, I'm gonna make sure when I do this, I'm gonna put my pie crust to drape in over here because we didn't have it go all the way around, and that is a-okay. So I just want it to drape in, and then we'll fix around. So this one is breaking as much, but that is a-okay. It will still look good and delicious at the end. There we go, and we're gonna just smush these together. And you know, it's a-okay, like I can see here, I've got a crack in it and my crust, and that's fine. It's gonna cook up just the same as if when we cut that crack will act just like a slice in it to let the air out. So it may not look as pretty as my first one turned out much nicer looking, but I am trying to rush through this and it will still cook the exact same. I'm pinching my edges around and then I'm gonna go through and use my fork to make sure I get all of it, just like this.
A couple questions. What are you making?
This is chicken pot pie. We put our first one in the oven. This is our second one. We made a butter crust earlier and it's letting sit. And then we sauteed up onions, carrots, celery, mushrooms, garlic, and chicken together with some garlic salt and black pepper. And then we made a roux out of flour, butter, and chicken bouillon and mixed it all together and we put it in the oven. So I'm gonna add this guy with my other one, knowing that that one will be finished about 5 to 10 minutes sooner than this one.
Asking if you're making pie crust.
Yeah, this is. So it is a butter pie crust. I'm just gonna put it in there. There we go. So I've got our first one has been cooking in there. It's already getting a nice golden color on the outside crust. And now we're going to start our apple base for our apple pie. And those will need about 30 minutes or so to cook. So let me clear this over here. So we just have a random selection of apples here. Granny Smiths are really the best apple to use, but I have some Pink Ladies and some Honeycrisp. We just got a lot of apples in, so they're good to use. I kind of cut them in quarters, and then I just do a quick peel, and then get their skins off because I do not like skins in my apple pie. Some people do, I do not. And then I'm just gonna do a quick slice into my pan here. I don't worry about making them like evenly sized or if they even look pretty because we're gonna stew them kind of all together. And instead of cutting them the long ways, I find it easier to cut them the opposite way. So I'm not making like slices down, I'm cutting each quarter the opposite way down, and I think they cut a lot easier. So, and I find peeling my apples with a paring knife works so much better than if you were to try to peel them with a peeler. I used to have one of those old-fashioned, like you put the apple on and you crank it and it takes the peel off. But I find that it takes so long to get them all in there and it doesn't get all the apple peel off. And you still have to do all the slicing. This one, I guess I've mastered it, so it goes pretty fast. You could, like you're supposed to use really like a tart apple like Granny Smith when making it, but I've just found through the any apples you have work great. Just make sure they're not too old. Mealy apples just turn to mush when you make them into a pie. The
best was when we had our own pear trees.
Oh yes, we used to make apple pie with pears, and it is delicious. Most people can't even tell they're pears, but it adds just a slightly different flavor profile to it, and it was so good. Our old house used to have had 2 pear trees, and boy do I miss those. I planted 2 cherry trees here because we love cherries as well. They haven't. One of them died, didn't make it. And the other one, we've had it for like 4 years now, and I bought it as like a 5-year tree, so it would actually like bloom and provide me fruit within my lifetime. It's still, I get like 1 flower every year on it. And I think it's because the partner that it was supposed to be with it died, so I don't think it's getting pollinated well. Although I do have, we live in right outside of Nashville, I do have a fig tree, and that one bores me a lot of figs every year. I just have one, but I get maybe 50 to 100 figs off of it. And nothing is better than a freshly picked fig that's ripe and ready. I always have dreams of having like a suburban garden farm. I grew up in Iowa, which is, you can imagine, when most people think of Iowa, they think of farms everywhere, and it's pretty much true. And so I'm always like, oh, it would be so nice to have a little farm, or have like my little suburban farm here. And then I realized I have 5 kids and 3 cats and 2 dogs. I've got enough to take care of. I'm not very good at keeping my plants alive. They always die every time I'm like, I'm gonna do great with my garden this year, and like a month and a half later, everything's dead because I don't water it enough. And Tennessee summers are hot.
We get good tomatoes and cucumbers.
Yes. Tomatoes and cucumbers are more forgiving than other plants. And I will say my herbs, especially my perennial ones that will grow back every year, those do great. They can survive on their own. But other things, I've tried to be lofty. We did grow pumpkins one year. We actually have like 30 or 40 pumpkins grow, and that was amazing. And I've tried to repeat that, and they always die. We always take a long vacation right around 4th of July, and they always die on our long vacation. Like last year, we went to South Dakota, and we went to the Badlands and the Black Hills, and we went camping there. That was fun. I did a lot of campfire cooking, which is so different from like you have limited supplies, but made some pretty delicious campfire meals. But we just had so much fun there. I went camping there when I was a kid, and I saw, like Mount Rushmore, and we did, explore the national parks, and it was just a lot of fun. And it was one of those things that you great memories with your kids, and people don't do a lot of that now, especially camping. And I'll tell you, we were crazy because we took Jackie, how old was Jackie? He was like 9 months at the time. We had a pack and play in our tent so it was all 7 of us in the tent, including Jackie and his pack and play. And we had 2 cots that somehow our 2 older kids ended up on the cots over us adults. They were meant to be for us, but we ended up on the ground with our younger ones. I told my husband, we need an air mattress. I used to make fun of my mom for having an air mattress in camping, and I said, we need an air mattress. It just hurts too much. We're too old now. But those were some good times. But moral of the story is my garden completely dies when we're gone, because it's like 2 weeks that we're gone, and Tennessee in July, that means no rain and 100-degree weather. So everything just bakes and turns brown, and hardly anything survives it. Here we go. Almost done chopping up these these apples. So I just make sure you take off that top skin. It's okay if you get a little piece of it, but those don't ever cook down nicely in your pies. So they'll get to be really tough and chewy, and they're just not good. I saw somebody like had made one with the skins on it, and I'm just like, oh, now I'm gonna have apple skins in my pie. I always say, do the extra work, take them off. It will make for much better tasting. Perfect. I will also say, with apples, for some reason, I had 6 apples here and I've sliced them up, but it always looks like they've done nothing. It looks like I've cut up nothing in here. They always shrink down. There we go. And what I'm gonna do once I'm done cutting this one up, I'm gonna turn on my heat, add just a little bit of butter, some sugar, some fresh lemon juice, and some cinnamon, and just a pinch of salt. And I'm gonna cook it together because I like to make sure my apples are nice and tender before I put them in my pie crust. Because if you've ever had a pie where you bite into it and it's just dry inside, I hate that. And this is what I found to like kind of combat that, is just making sure I just do a quick pre-cook on it. And if you want to game the system, you could always buy canned apple pie filling. It's not as good, but it's quicker. Okay, I like to, before I squeeze out my lemons, I like to just give them a quick roll. It just kind of helps them, I think, makes it easier to squeeze the juices out. And then I'm just gonna make sure I get some of these seeds out. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like lemons nowadays have a million seeds in them. I don't remember them having so many seeds in them when I was younger. But I find like sometimes I'll squeeze a lemon, and I always squeeze it up just so I don't get any of those lemon seeds in it. But I found one, it had like 50 lemon seeds in it. I just don't remember that as a kid. There. And I'm gonna pick out some of these lemon seeds. There we go. I find I never use that pre-bought lemon juice, you know, like that True Lemon or whatever that's called. It just doesn't taste good. I think it has such a chemical-y taste to it. I find really what you need is just fresh lemon. It makes all the difference in so many recipes. If it calls for lemon juice, you gotta use fresh lemon juice. And this will give a little bit of that tartness back to those apples. I'll just rinse my hands real quick. And now I'm going to add a little bit of sugar. Let me get a scoop. I always try to leave scoops in my thing, so I always have them there, but I always take one out and I forget it. I'm gonna just use about a half a cup.
Tina agrees that there's been a lot of changes with our food since growing up. I think so too.
I know, it is. I just don't ever remember lemons having this one. And there's just so many things, I just don't remember them quite the way they are. So I put about a half a cup of sugar in there, and I'm gonna sprinkle it with some cinnamon. And this is probably gonna end up to be about a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half. And you really need to add a pinch of salt. That is just gonna enhance the flavors and really bring them out, but it makes all the difference. And a little bit of butter. The butter is really gonna be for when I add my cornstarch in. It's gonna be the fat that it's gonna create the little, like, the slurry, as they would say with it. But
we got another comment that fruit doesn't taste the same. I agree. I feel like it's not nearly as flavorful as it used to be.
It is, especially when you get them from the store. The farmers markets are better because you're fresh, but when you buy them from the grocery store, they're already picked before they're ripe, and so they ripen off, and they're not as good. Like tomatoes aren't as good, just everything. We were in Mexico over winter break. We went on a cruise with our kids, and we had the best guacamole there. And I watched the guy make it in front of us. And I was like, I'm gonna repeat this recipe at home. And it just could not, it wasn't the same. Their avocados, I think, were picked fresh and were ripe and they weren't pasty, they were just smooth and fluffy and delicious. And I mean, I was close, but it just wasn't the same. And I really think it was because those avocados they were using were probably picked from the farm that day.
I agree. And Kathy says especially bananas, and more to your point, I think it's anything that's not grown domestically that has to be transported. It's not nearly as good as I feel like it used to be.
So I have my apples in there cooking up. And now we're going to make our crumb topping. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to put a stick of butter in here. Let's see if I have one out. And I'm just going to pop it in my microwave real quick and melt it. This is softened butter, so it will melt pretty fast. I don't actually think I need a whole stick. That will make a lot. So I'm going to use about 2/3 of a stick. Just pop it over here in my microwave for about 30 seconds. And then got my things cooking over here. And what I'm going to do while that's melting, I'm going to start rolling out the pie crust for my apple pie. The base of it, because I like to do a crust on the bottom and a crumb topping on top. So I'm gonna smush this out to start. This makes just a little bit easier. And I think that beep, so let me go grab it real quick. Perfect. Now it needs a little bit longer. I was hoping it would just be quick, but I'll grab my cornstarch too. Because my cornstarch is what I'm gonna use in my apples to make that kind of more gelatinous filling, you know, that you get on an apple pie. Anytime you mix cornstarch with a fruit and you stir it in, it's called a slurry, and it will thicken up and it will just help it so that your pie doesn't get too runny. Because you don't want to have a runny filling, it will make your crust soggy. You could also use flour as well. I just find that cornstarch does a little bit of a better job. Okay. Roll this guy out. And this is one thing nice about making this pot pie is I make enough pie crust that we can have a nice apple pie, because I find I rarely make apple pie on its own just because the extra steps needed involved in the pie crust. I a lot of times just do an apple crisp or just something simple along that line where I don't need a pie crust bottom. There we go. Just a little bit more. I'll put my pies thing right in the middle. Think a little more this way. One thing is nice, if you have a glass pie crust or container, you can really see how it's gonna fit over. There we go. Okay, let's give this a quick stir, because it's starting to really let those apple juice, the juice from the apples kind of really come out and soak out. I'll grab my butter. Perfect. So we have our butter melted right here. And what we're going to do for our crumb topping is I'm just gonna add some brown sugar. I'm gonna start, it's probably about a half a cup. I'm gonna stir it together. And I like to stir it and kind of make like a brown sugar paste first before adding the flour. That way I know my butter and my brown sugar are well mixed. A little stir right here. Perfect. And then I'm just gonna add enough flour to my brown sugar and butter mixture to where it crumbles apart. I don't want it to stick together, I want it to have a nice crumble. So I'm just gonna start with a little bit first and just slowly add it in and add more when I need it. But it's gonna be probably around a cup of flour. And you're just gonna stir it until it crumbles. You wanna have good crumbles that are more floury versus wet ones. Like if you were to cook this up, it would just turn to mush. So you wanna have nice dry crumbles. Give that a good stir. And then I'm just gonna get really in here with my fingers. You want them to be a little bit drier because the butter will melt and you want it to really like flake up nicely. There we go. Perfect. This is about the texture of my crumb that I want. So just kind of like a dry, crumbly mix. Okay, now I'm gonna stir this. And this, I'm about to turn that down because we are about done with this. I'm gonna put my pie crust over my tin. And just fill it up here. Pull it off. This is also why it's great to have the parchment paper, because it just makes it easier for transferring. And then I'm just gonna make sure it's even. Push down the sides. And before I add my apple base in, I'm going to put in a little bit of cornstarch in here. You're gonna use just about like a tablespoon max. I'm just gonna sprinkle it and then I'm gonna give it a good stir. And this is gonna work with the juice from the apples and the butter to really add it to thicken up into kind of more of a gel, like an apple gel, and it will continue to heat, but it will prevent your pie from getting too runny and making your crust soggy. And then we're just gonna pour our apple base in. Get all of that good flavor in here. Just like this. Spread it around. And then here's where the magic happens. This crumb topping is the best part about it. I like to put it like just around the edges, fold it up, and then what I'm gonna do is I fold my pie crust over my crumb area once I have it all in here. Say, this is my kids, if I'd let them, they would eat just the crumb off of this pie because it's just so good. Okay, and then I'm just gonna kind of fold all of my pie crust over because I find that it just crisps up nicely and it looks more like a galette than a pie. But there's my apple pie crisp, and this will bake in the oven for about 30 minutes at 425 as well. We can peek in there and we can take a look at our chicken pot pies. And it looks like, I'm gonna put this right here underneath. It looks like this guy is actually ready to come out. So I will take him out and you guys can see him, but I won't cut into him for you guys tonight because he has to sit for about 5 or so minutes before he cooks up, just so you don't have liquid hot magma chicken pot pie in there. And I'm gonna put him, I'm gonna see if I can move this apple pie up here so it can get under the heat as well. I got this guy, I'm gonna place him right here. And you guys can look. He's got a nice, crispy, golden crust. You can see some of the juices bubbling up, but it is delicious. And I will post a picture of it cut open later so you guys can see the inside. Thanks for joining us tonight. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do some live shows every day. I really enjoy cooking and sharing our journey with you guys. Thanks for joining us.